Hi, welcome back. This is Beersborn. In today's video, we're going to take a look at how we can add an attack for our second enemy. Now, we've already set up the movement system for our enemy. What we've done is create a system of instance variables for each direction and timers to turn those directions on and off. So our enemy should just move in a set pattern. It always moves, in my case, left to right, and then up and down. What we're going to do is we're going to make it so that when the enemy gets close to our player, it's going to stop moving, and instead it's going to trigger an attack animation. So the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to add the animation into our enemy sprite. So let's double click on our enemy 2 in our layout. Now up in the top right, we have our animations. You should have an idle animation. If you followed along with the last video, you should also have a walk animation. We're going to right click and we're going to add a third animation. We can go over to the folder that's up in the top left and we want to find the attack animation that we've made for this enemy. Now if you haven't exported your attack animation yet, open it up in Piskel. Go to the export, make sure you have GIF selected, make sure your scale's correct, and click download. If you've already done that, you should find your exported GIF animation in your folder. Here's mine, it's called Worm Attack. I'm gonna open that up. And I have a 7-frame animation, or I guess an 8-frame animation of the worm shooting some spikes out of its back. Now there's a couple things we wanna do here. We wanna change the name. If I go up to the top right, you can click on it once. And then down here at the bottom, you'll see a place where we can change the name. I recommend naming this one Attack. It doesn't have to be Attack, but it's an easy name to remember that this is the attack animation. I would also recommend maybe changing the speed. If I right click, I can preview and see how fast it plays. 5 is a little slow for mine. Now this just depends on how many frames you used, so it might be a good speed for you, but you can always adjust it to make it faster or slower. I'm gonna turn mine up to 12. And I think that looks pretty good. So we have our frames, we have the name, we have the speed. Good. Now, if you haven't put in the walk animation, you want to add that as well. Once you've done that, we can close our animations editor. We also want to add a behavior here. What we're going to do is we're going to use a behavior that we've used previously. If I go over to the behaviors panel over here on the left, click on behaviors. We have an 8 direction and a timer. We're going to add a third behavior. We're going to use line of sight. Line of sight is something that can trigger an event or an action when 2 objects get close enough together, when they're within range of each other. We used it for the first enemy. We're going to use it for the second enemy too. Now, once you've done line of sight, you should see a little section on the left for the line of sight options. There's 2 things I want to change here right at the start. Number 1, where it says obstacles. By default, it's set to solids. If we keep that at solids, for some reason, it leads to problems down the road. I'm going to recommend that you change that to custom. So obstacles custom, range is how big the field of vision is for your enemy. We want this to be pretty small. We don't want the attack to happen until the enemy and the player are pretty close together. 10,000 is really big. I'm going to start at 250. I'm going to recommend you start at 252. That's a pretty close range. Now, depending on how big your sprites are and how big your attack is, or if it's a ranged attack even, maybe you want that range to be bigger, but I think 250 is a good place to start. We can always change that later. Good. Now let's go into our event sheet. We're going to scroll down to the bottom. We're going to add some more events. Let's click on Add Event, and the event is going to be for Enemy 2. We're going to scroll down to the section for Line of Sight. Now, if you remember, this has a bunch of options in it. We're going to use this one. It says has LOS to object. LOS means line of sight. So if we click on this, we can say, okay, what object is it looking for? And the object we're going to choose is our main character, our player. And click Done. So when it has a line of sight to our main character, we can make things happen. What we're going to do is we're going to set the animation for our enemy to change the attack animation. So let's click on Add Action. Let's go to Enemy 2. Let's go to Set Animation. And let's start by typing in a quotation mark, and we should see a list of our animations. We're going to do Attack. So when the enemy and the main character are close together, the animation should shift to Attack. Now let's see if it works. Here comes the enemy. I get close to it. Now see, it doesn't work. It just stops. It just freezes, right? The animation doesn't play. It keeps moving, but the animation doesn't play. Whenever you have a situation like this, where an animation doesn't trigger, it seems like it just gets stuck on one frame, that usually means that you have some kind of conflict. There might be 2 different events that are telling your enemy to do 2 different animations at the same time. Now, it's this part for us. In this situation, what we have here is that the enemy is moving, so the animation should be walk, but also the enemy is close, so the animation should be attack. These two things are in conflict with each other. When you're working on your game and you have a situation where the animation just doesn't play, check to make sure you don't have a situation where two events are telling it to be two different animations at the same time. What we're going to do for this is we're simply going to get rid of these events. They worked for us in the last video, but now that we're adding an attack, we don't need them. We're going to do something different. So I'm going to click over here on the left side for this event. I can right click and I can just delete it. I can do the same thing for this. When it's not moving, set the animation to idle. We could keep that if you want. We probably don't need it, but it's probably not going to get in the way. Let's right click on it and click delete. Great. So now let's try it out. Comes up, starts the attack animation, right? Now there's a couple weird things about this. Number one is that the animation just kind of freezes wherever it left off. It's not playing the walking animation. And also I don't really like that the enemy still moves while the attack animation's playing. So we have a couple things that we're going to need to fix here. Number one, I'm going to make it so that when the animation is attacking, we're going to stop the enemy's movement so that it'll pause for a second while it attacks. Now, if you want your enemy to attack and move simultaneously, don't worry about this step. But I think it's nice to have the enemy stop, attack, and then move again. So we're going to add an action for enemy 2. And we're going to go up to the top here for the 8 direction section. This is what controls our enemy's movement. You'll find one that says set enabled. Set enabled just turns on or off the whole 8 direction thing. If we click on that, we want to turn the state to disabled. That turns off all the 8 direction movements. So if I click play, when the enemy gets close, spikes come out, and it doesn't move actually ever again. Now it's just stuck. So that's a good start, but what we want to do is create another event so that when our player is further away out of the attack range of our enemy, we should have the 8 direction movement enabled again so it can move. We should also set the animation to go back to a moving animation. So let's do that. I'm going to create a second event. It's going to start out the same way. We're going to go to our enemy 2. We're going to scroll down to has line of sight to object. And the object that we choose is going to be the main character. Click done. But this time, we're going to say when it doesn't have line of sight to the main character, when it's not within attack range. And I can do that by right-clicking and hitting invert. If you remember from our previous videos, what invert does is it just means the opposite of. So now when the enemy 2 is not in attack range of the main character, we can add an action. Number 1, we're going to go to our enemy 2 and set the animation to be the walking animation. And second, we're going to go to enemy 2 and we're going to go to the set enabled for our 8 direction movement and enable it. And that's it. Let's try it out. Attacks when I'm close. When I move away, it goes back to its movement. Good. Now there's a couple small things we're going to fix, but in general, this is the basic idea. It's just 2 events. One says that when it's close to the player, make it attack and stop it moving. When it's far away from our player, set it to the walking animation and set the movement to enabled. Now the last thing we're going to do is that right now, when we're close to our enemy, all those timers we set up are still running. The fact that you can kind of like see it turn directions for a second, that's because all of these timers are still running and it's like triggering it to like turn left true or right true or whatever. And that's kind of a problem. We want to pause these timers while it's attacking. So that way these timers don't run out and it doesn't change the movement. And then we can resume these timers when it's not within the range. We can do that by adding an action to this first event. I'm going to click on Add Action. I'm going to go to Enemy 2. I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom. At the bottom, you'll see a section for timers. One says Pause/Resume Timer. If you click on that, what we can do is we can type in the name of any of the timers that we've created and pause it. Now, if you don't know the names of the timers, it's these right here. These events where it says like Enemy 2 on timer, and then in quotation marks, move left, move right, move up, move down. Those are the names of your timers. So I'm going to add an action to this first event, enemy 2, scroll down to the bottom, go to pause resume timer, and simply type in the name of one of my timers. Let's start with move left. Now yours might be named different. Make sure you're getting the right name by checking up here in the event sheet. And the state, paused. We're going to do this for all the timers that we've created. So I have one for move right. I'm going to add an action. I have another one for move up. And a fourth one for move down. And I think that's it. I can go back and check. I have 4 timers here: move left, move right, move up, move down, move left, move right, move up, move down. So while it's attacking, all of these timers will be paused. It won't change any of their movement patterns. Now, when it's outside of that range, we want to make these timers resume again. We don't want to leave them paused. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an action, enemy 2. We're going to go down to pause resume timer, and we're going to type in those same names. So I'm going to start with move left, but this time instead of pausing it, I'm going to resume it. I'm going to do the same thing for move right. Change the state to resumed. You can also copy and paste if you want to save yourself some time. You can right click on any of these. So like say I want to take these 2. I could right click, copy, go down here, right click, paste, and then just change it from pause to resume. I like to do that to save time. You can also just do it by hand, whatever you prefer. Good. So it pauses in the first event, resumes in the second event. Let's test it out. Perfect. When I'm close, it attacks. When I'm far away, it goes back to its movement. Great. Now the last thing I'm going to add for this is an attack hitbox, which is something we did for our previous enemy 2. If you remember, enemy 1 has an attack hitbox. The idea is that we want to create an invisible square that represents where the damage will be done. So if our player hits the hitbox, it'll damage our enemy or damage our player once we set up our player's life system. So I'm going to make a hitbox for enemy 2. Now to do that, I'm going to go to the layout. I'm going to right click anywhere in this white open space. I'm going to click on insert new object. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to click 1 time on sprite. I'm going to change the name of the sprite to enemy 2. I'll call it enemy 2 attack. I think that's what I called my other ones too. You can call it anything you want. I think that this is an easy name to remember. Enemy 2 attack. And click insert. And we're going to click anywhere in our space. And we're simply going to fill this square with any color that we want. It doesn't ultimately matter because we're going to turn this sprite, this hitbox, invisible. So just choose a color. I'm going to go with a nice kind of blue color and just use the paint bucket to fill it in. That's all you need to do. This big square is going to be our hitbox. Now what I recommend doing is changing the shape of it to fit what you want the damage to look like. And what I mean by that is like, say your enemy punches, and maybe you want the damage to just be at the tip of your enemy's fist. In my case, my worm enemy shoots a bunch of spikes out of its back, right? You can see that here. So I'm going to make the hitbox go where the spikes are, which is kind of right above its body, kind of all along its body. So my hitbox is going to be kind of long, about the same size as its body. So make the size of your hitbox whatever you want. I would recommend when you're done adjusting the size of your hitbox, just drag it off the white space. If you scroll up or to the left, you'll see the gray area. Drag your hitboxes off into that space. That way they won't be there in your game when the game starts and won't get in the way. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to our event sheet and we're going to add an event that spawns the hitbox whenever our enemy 2's attack animation is playing. So let's go to add event. Let's go to enemy 2. And we're going to go down to is playing. And the animation that we want to use for is playing is the attack animation. So this says when the enemy 2's attack animation is playing, we can add an action. Let's go to enemy 2. And we're going to go down to spawn another object. Click on spawn another object. The object that we want to have spawn is the enemy to attack hitbox. So I'm going to double click on that. And that's good. Now if I try it out, when I get close to the enemy, the attack animation plays and it makes the attack hitbox. Now there's a couple things I need to adjust here. I need to make sure that it comes out at the right spot. By default, it's just going to come out from the center of your enemy. So you might want to adjust where the hitbox is spawned. You also might want to adjust when it comes out in the animation. We also want to make sure that the hitboxes don't just stay here forever. So let's fix all those things. The first thing I'm going to do is change where the hitbox comes out from. And I'm going to do that by using the image points. We've done this before, so if you want to give it a shot on your own, I recommend it. But if you want to go through it step by step with me, this is how we do it. Double click on your enemy. We want to go to this tool right here. It looks like a little crosshairs. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the attack animation over here on our animations window. We're going to go over here to our image points on the left. We're going to right click and we're going to add a new image point. We're going to call this one attack. This is going to be our attack image point. Now, if you right click on it, you can click on apply to whole animation. That way the attack image point will be on all the frames of your animation. And you can control where the little red square is. That's where the hitbox will come out from. So like from mine, I want the hitbox to be up where the spikes are, right? So I can control that by adjusting where the hitbox is for each frame of the animation. Now, once you have your hitbox image point in the right place, we have to go back to our event sheet. We're going to double click on the spawn action. And we're going to set the image point, change it from 0 to quotation marks, attack. That's the name we just named our image point, right? You have to use the quotation marks in order for it to work. And then click done. If you try it out, it should work. Now, you can't even see my enemy because he's hidden behind his hitboxes, but you can see that they do spawn in different places based on where the image points are. If yours doesn't work, if your hitbox is still just kind of in the middle of your enemy, make sure that the name is the right name on the image point, matching the image point. Good. Now, the other thing I want to do is, this may or may not be important for you, but if you look at my animation, the first couple frames of my animation, my worm is just kind of charging up for the attack, and then the spikes come out on frame 4, right? So ideally, I wouldn't want the hitbox to come out until frame 4. I can do that. All I have to do is go to the event sheet. I'm going to double click over here on the left corner. And if I go to my enemy 2, you'll find the option for compare frame. If I click on compare frame, this is what frame of the animation we want to have the action happen on. So if I say, okay, equal to 4, now yours is going to be a different number. Maybe it's even frame 1 or frame 0 or whatever. You're going to set that number to whatever you want. And that way, the hitbox will only come out on that frame of animation, rather than all the frames of your animation. Good. Now, we don't want these hitboxes to stay here, right? We don't want them to just last for a second or even a fraction of a second and then disappear. Because as it is right now, if our player runs into these boxes, nothing happens, but later it's going to hurt the player, right? So we want them to disappear. We can do that by adding one last event. Let's go to add event. We're going to go to enemy 2 attack, the hitbox that we just created. And we're going to go down to on created. What that means is, as soon as it's created, we're going to add an action. We're going to go to the system, and we're going to scroll to the bottom for the wait action. Now, if you click next, what that does is it means that the computer is going to wait for however long you set it to before the next action happens. We want this to be a small number. I would recommend like 0.1, something really small, just a fraction of a second. So after 0.1 seconds, we're going to add an action. We're going to go to our enemy 2 attack, and we're going to go down to destroy. It'll destroy itself. It'll pop up, wait for 0.1 seconds, and then destroy. Good. Now, we don't want the player to see this hitbox. We want it to be invisible. So the last thing we have to do is we're going to add one last action here to this event. We're going to go to enemy 2 attack. We're going to find set visible, and we're going to set the visibility to invisible. Click done. Now, right now, this is happening after it waits, right? So it waits, it destroys itself, and then it turns invisible. That's not really going to work. We want it to be invisible right from the beginning. So you want to drag that event to the top of the list. So as soon as it's created, it's invisible, it waits 0.1 seconds, and then it's destroyed. If that's set up correctly, you shouldn't see the hitbox, but you can trust it's there. And if you ever want to go back to test it to make sure it's in the right spot, you can always just double click on this, change it to visible, and then you should be able to see it. Great. Now, if you want to make a subgroup to clean some of this stuff up, we have a subgroup for our enemy 2 movement. I'm going to make a subgroup for my enemy 2 attack too. I'm going to right click on enemy 2. I'm going to add a subgroup. I'm going to call this enemy 2 attack. And I'm going to move all the events that I just made, which is only a couple, up to add event enemy 2 attack. Great. We'll leave it there. Thanks, guys. See you next time.